Well, this being the last one for the month of May, but then we are going to be beginning something new, and it has to do with children's sexual assaults. And because we are in still in the season of the Children's Day and all those things, of course, we went somewhere yesterday. I was going to buy something for our daughter, and they said it had finished. And I was like, like, what happened? They said they've been bringing children. Wonderful. So it's beautiful. Children are very, very good. But then there are a lot of things that you've got to learn and know about them so that they do not just become a waste in your hands. Now, our parents, due to increase in of children sexual assaults, we implore that our children should be educated and enlightened from home, especially on this matter. I mean, you cannot continue to allow your children to die in silence. They must be educated and enlightened from home, and it will be concretized in school. When they now go to school, it will now be concretized. They must be educated from home. So a lot of those children are dying in silence and experiencing emotional trauma, and it's not a good one to have children that are supposed to be free minded and supposed to be enjoying life dying in trauma, in emotional trauma at a very early stage in life. It's not good. And so we'll do a little bit, or we'll do some kind of children counseling, and of course it affects the parents. It's the parents that when you're talking to a child, I've said to you before, when somebody says, tells a child outside there, it was my pastor that said to us, somebody said, you want my old leko, yeah, like you, this child, you are not what was it? You are not trained. The person is not abusing the child. He's not insulting the child. He's insulting the parents. So he said he will do everything possible so that his own child will not be told outside that, oh, leko. You understand? So we need to understand a lot of things, that when these children are hit by these things, it's the parents indirectly. If anything goes wrong with your children, you cannot be fine. If you are a reasonable parent, if you are a parent indeed, you can't be fine your children be going the other way around. So we'll be looking at a few questions that you should ask your children regularly. You should ask them regularly, as long as they remain under you as your children, until they get married and then they move. Of course, they grow, and then even when they grow, you still are there as their guide. They can still come to you for advices and all those things. So, but then as children, you should ask them a few questions. But then, of course, even before the question, you should teach them a number of things. There's nothing wrong with you teaching your children the body parts, getting them to know what the body parts are, the types of body parts. Of course, there are two types. There are the public parts and there are the private parts. So you are there to explain to them what the private parts are. What the private parts are, or the parts that are being covered, the part that ought to be covered, that has to be covered. And then you have to talk to them about what the public parts are, the parts that are the parts that are open. And so your private parts, you should let them know that your private parts are your personal body. It's your personal body parts. In other words, it's for you. You are the one to keep this one. You are the one to preserve it. You are the one to protect it. And so it's not for flaunting. It's not the part that you just open. And I think some parents don't even understand this, so they even wear certain types of dresses for their children at very, very young age. And then you shouldn't be surprised while those children grow up with such mentality and they do not get to dress properly when they grow up. They don't, because they've grown up with it. They just understand, this is the way mommy taught. And you know what? We must understand that what we as parents instill into these children are very, very key, and they stick to them. They just feel like that's the right thing to do. And so let them know the two body parts, the parts of the body, the private parts, and the body parts. The one that's open to the public, the hands, your face, your leg, the feet. You understand all those parts. The parts that are open.
And also not to try to look for another name for it.
For it, no.
Because
no.
Some people, if I was hearing a particular parent say, I tell my children it is their toilet. I'm like, that's degrading.
Yes, seriously, it is. It is. So let's not get another name for it. Let's not look for another name. If you are teaching your children, please tell them. Let them know. Let them know. Let them not get to learn those parts, and let them know the parts that make up each of these, these different parts, the private parts and the body part. Now mention the two types of touches. The two types of touches. Of course, there are good touches and there are bad touches. There are good touches and there are bad touches. It's important that you let them know the difference in the two types of touches, the good touch and the bad touch. Now, what are the good touch? A touch on any public part. Okay, you shake hands with somebody. That's okay. You just understand. You know the parts. A good touch is a touch on the public parts. The parts that we have mentioned as being public. Your face, your hand. Oh, I like this. Your eyelashes. Oh, I like your hair. Oh, I like your. But then even at that, there are even limits to how the restrictions to how far somebody can touch you or touch your public parts. Even the public parts. So of course there are good touches. If somebody stretches his hand, extends his hand to you to shake hands with you, there's nothing bad in doing that. So of course there are also bad touches. The bad touches are the areas that are restricted, the private parts that are being covered. Every part of your body that is supposed to be covered. Every part of your body that's supposed to be covered. And then of course I told you that I've already said that those parts are the parts that belong to you. They are your own. They are your own. And so if someone is trying to touch or play with your private parts, it's called sexual abuse. It's called abuse. Whatever form it takes, you understand? Whatever form it takes. Somebody wants to fondle a child, somebody is touching a child unnecessarily, touching a child in the parts, in the private parts. Even sometimes you touch a child too much in the public parts. Even in the public parts, somebody could mean a victim or the person that's to commit this crime might even go through the public parts for touching the hair, going like that, and then so we must help the children to know the limits. To know the limits. Don't allow so and so person. Now when we get to some point, you will understand there are even some parts that even as daddies you are not even supposed to, even though she's your daughter, there are even some parts that when she gets to a certain age, just leave mommy to handle that part. They'll just leave mommy to do that part. Now it's not because there's anything. You remember there was that issue with that presenter in Lagos on one of the TV stations that made mention of something on TV. Okay. She was going to say she meant something else, but then the thing blew up. It escalated and became something. And of course she even had issues at home. She had issues at home because it was meant to say that she was saying something else about her husband, because she was actually saying that there are some parts there are some things that she doesn't allow her husband to do for their daughter. And then it escalated that people came to think that she was saying that her husband was abusive. So we should understand that there are certain things that you just leave mommy to handle those parts. And even when it comes to the opposite sex, there is a level to which the boy grows to. It is daddy that will handle the boy. So you see, you discover that you yourselves as parents have got to be educated. You can't educate somebody when you are not educated. You have people in school who are called teachers because they have been taught. They have been taught to teach. And so there are two different things. You can be taught to just practice something. You are being taught to practice medicine. But these ones are taught to teach others, to pass it on to others. So they are given it to pass it on to others. So you also have it, or you should also have it. Then you pass it on to others. So it's important that we understand those parts of not that I'll take that again. That if someone is trying to touch or play with your private parts, remember that we are talking about what you should teach your children, what you should get your children to understand, even from childhood. Once a child begins to understand words, once a child can understand, go and bring me this, go and take that. The child says, I want to drink water. She knows that she wants to drink water, or he knows that he wants to drink water. He will understand almost every other thing. It will begin to stick gradually. So these are some of the things that you tell them. When someone begins to touch you or play with the parts that you have taught the child to be private, When someone begins to do that, that is called sexual abuse. Now you now go on to say that who are the people who could abuse, who could be the ones, or who could be the perpetrators? Thank you. Who could be the perpetrators? Anybody. Yeah, it could be anybody. It could be anybody. I mean, it's so there will be nothing like that.
People like strangers.
Strangers and relatives. Strangers and relatives. We've had series of cases of, you know, even uncles, you know, having to abuse, you know, do you understand? Their nieces, cousins, and all those things. So it even happens, you know, amongst relatives. Do you understand? Now, this thing, we've got to understand that sometimes even the perpetrator did not even plan it. The perpetrator did not even plan it. Now, you have taught your child, for instance, you didn't teach your daughter to cover her private parts properly. The parts that we have termed private. You didn't teach her to cover the private parts properly. You've got to understand the psychology of man. And that's why I said earlier on that sometimes it's not even pre-planned. It's not something that is pre-planned. The pre-planned ones are not always much. The cases of pre-planned sexual abuse are not always, you know, so many as such. But then there are some of them like that. But then there are some cases where the man did not even plan it. You understand? You just left your child. You said your daughter should go and stay with one uncle. With your uncle. Now, I'm trying to say this not to say that some persons are not just some uncles are not good, but then look, it's better you avoid it than for you to now get into the mess, and then you are now trying to get out. You are now trying to get out of the emotional trauma and the torture of the whole things that have happened. So you get to teach your children that anybody, it could be anybody. It could be anybody. You are meant to stay with your...
Most of the reported cases have actually been from known people.
Known people. That's what I'm saying.
People the child sees on a regular. It could even be the driver, for example.
The driver.
We've heard of cases.
I've heard of cases of the teacher that's... the teacher was the mother's classmates. They were together in the teacher's college. They were still having a course, but because the teacher was studying mathematics, she wanted her daughter to do well in mathematics, and said the guy should be handle the child, and that was it. I mean, seriously, that was it.
So they are known people.
They are known people. So we should get the children to understand this, that these perpetrators are known people. And the other part I was trying to mention that time, I'm very careful with my use of word here, so that you don't take it out of context. We also need to be careful by understanding the psychology of man. The psychology of man has to do with his senses, his seeing, his eyes, what he sees. A man, for instance, the adult man can have a sexual relationship with somebody he doesn't have emotions for, somebody he doesn't love, just because of what he's seen. You try to explain, you try to bring it out, try to understand what it was a man looking at a mad woman, so to speak, somebody who has mental issues, and then he still goes down with her. You understand? And so some of these things they do, and after they do, they just get out of it and they're like, did I actually do that? You understand? Now, once you understand the psychology of man, you won't do certain things around him. And the man will not be overconfident of himself. The Bible says that let him that thinketh that he is standing, let him be careful, lest he falls. The point is that you will think that you are actually standing, whereas you're already on the floor. So we parents should also be careful. Not that the man naturally wants to abuse. You say he's an abuser. No, we are not saying that. We are only saying that you should be careful. If you have taught your children these things, it will not be a big deal sending your child to go and stay with so and so person now. Go and stay with uncle, or go and stay with auntie, or go and stay with. The child already knows that once auntie begins to touch me in so places. And
now that you're mentioning this,
yes,
there have been cases as well where it's the feminine gender. That's because some people say, thank God I have all boys.
Yeah.
The boys are also being abused.
Yes. So it's important. Boys are also being abused. So there are the two sides. It's the aunt, could that be the auntie or be the uncle. So it could be just anybody. We're only just using that. It could be a teacher. It could, like I mentioned earlier, it could be a teacher. It could be somebody, a neighbor. You understand? Somebody just let's. I'm going out, so let's go and stay with my neighbor. And you have not taught that child to escape. If somebody begins to touch her or somebody begins to touch him in certain places, it starts from those places. It doesn't just, the man will not just carry the child and start. No, it will start from those places. He wants to weaken her. She wants to weaken him first. That's the secret. That's the secret. You weaken a woman first before you have anything to do with her. You weaken the man first before you do anything to the man. So you teach the child that, look, once these things begin to happen, before you get weak, before this person weakens you, get out of the place. Or you escalate the matter. You shout, you cry, somebody will hear you cry, or you run at the door. Once the person is beginning to go in certain directions, you just know what to do. So you would have taught your children those things. So I already said that. Who can perpetrate these abuses? Anybody. I'm not saying that you can't trust people, but then if you have done your homework properly, then your children are safe outside there. Your children are safe with anybody, and that's why you remember the case of that great man. That's one of our leaders. That I said the daughter came and said was going for a birthday, and then he said go, and then the child came back and said no. She could not stay there. They were touching themselves in certain places. That child had been taught. She was not convenient. It wasn't a convenient place to stay anymore. It wasn't a convenient place. So if you teach your children, it says that you should teach your child the way he should go, and then when he grows, as he's growing up, he won't find it. It will be a problem to depart from it, because as he's growing, he's molding and forming. You understand? And it gets to a point where it becomes difficult to bend again, because it's drying up. As the child is growing, it's drying up. And so when it gets to a point, it's like dry fish. If it tries to bend, it breaks. So it's very careful. So you teach the child properly. So anybody could perpetrate this. And then I think you should talk to your children about their lips. Talk to them about their lips. No one must kiss me or kiss my child on the lips. Talk to them.
Even guests.
Yes. Well. Don't take it.
A mother just has a baby.
Yeah.
And folks are coming around to, this pretty baby.
Yeah.
And it feels like you're the odd one there. Whether it is my biological child or not, every child is my child.
It's my child, yeah.
Sometimes I can't tell the guests. I tell the parents, like, tell your guests, don't. Whether it's a male child or a female child, must you kiss? Just carry the baby out. You are fine. Drop the baby.
In fact, I think that's even an extreme. Why would you go ahead and start kissing another person's child? Was that? So tell the children, teach them, not about their lips. Their lips are also private. It's for them. It's for them. Teach them. It's private. No one must kiss them on their lips. No one. And even we as parents, we should be very careful. Daddy kissing daughter. You can peck your child. Yeah. You can peck your child on the cheek. No, not yes. Even for the parent, not lips. Not lips. You are your man and woman, my husband and wife. You can do that. Not to your children. Don't do that to your children. And even if you're going to do that, in fact, we will get there anyway. There are certain things that you should not even be doing in front of your children. Your child is watching you, and then you are doing your thing. You are doing your own thing because you are carried away. You didn't bother whether the child is awake or not, or whether the child is watching or not.
Assume the child knows we are married.
Yeah, you assume. That's serious trouble that you are breeding for yourself. Okay, let me just touch one more.
Just before then,
yes, please do. Yes.
There have been instances where, because of the movies, the information that is being passed across nowadays, you now find some people just do it innocently anyways. But then again, as we have said, you just can't tell who. Nobody carries the placard around and says, okay, so I'm going to abuse, or I'm an abuser, or in the future I will abuse, So they now come with where they will, all these movies now, they will hold the person's hand and kiss, like, oh, my queen, and then they kiss the person's hand. So when they now say, perpetrators actually had been seen holding the child's hand,
Yeah.
and oh, you're a queen, oh, or because the parents call the child princess, the person latches on that as well,
Yeah.
and tells the child, oh, my princess,
My
and
princess.
holds the child's hands and kisses.
Yeah.
It's also part of the gradual
thing.
You know,
Yeah.
you just never know who
Mm.
you know, would do that, whether or not anybody tells you you're a princess. I think these are
Yeah.
part of the things
We should instill into
Yeah,
them.
into
Let them
the-
know.
in the
Nobody, they don't need to. Nobody has to use that to cajole you. And maybe to add to that, when we have some persons around who say we call your daughter, we're calling your daughter their wife, my wife, my wife, and they are doing it for, as far as you are concerned, you think it's a joke. And then sometimes it's even they might even take it like it's even just say my wife, and then the woman too is saying it's telling your boy, your handsome boy, my husband, and
Or
you
my
too, you are
daughter's
smart.
husband.
Or my daughter's husband,
My son's wife.
my son's wife. I've heard stories of a lady who got abused by a mother's friend's son, who had been saying my son's wife. That was how she got abused. That was how she got abused. So we should be also, we just also need to be very, very careful about that. About, you know, who calls you, what people call your daughter, your children. No. It's just like, you know, our leaders, he said, you know, he had an interview and he said, so your wife, and he said no, he said they only say our wife in the family. You know this language. He said no, he told them no, it's not our wife. It's my wife. So let me wrap it up here. You see, the last one I was going to give is that this abuse take place anywhere. Take place anywhere. At home, in school, in the dormitory. It takes place anywhere. So you should keep a watch. And then we'll continue from there next week by God's grace. God bless you and have a very beautiful week.
Thank you very much.